Have you ever tried shooting 24 frames per second video on your Pocket 3 and been disappointed with the results? Take a look at this video here. The cars have this choppy, staccato look to them, which just doesn't look very nice. The reason for this is that we're shooting in auto, and the shutter speed that the Pocket 3 has chosen for us is so fast that each frame looks very sharp. To illustrate, here's a photo taken with a fast shutter speed of 1/250th of a second. Notice how the car looks frozen in motion even though it's moving. Now, at higher frame rates like 30 or 60 FPS, frames are changing fast enough that things look smooth even without motion blur in each frame. But when you're only stitching together 24 of these frames in a second, things just don't look good, never mind cinematic. According to the 180-degree shutter rule, at 24p we should be shooting with a shutter speed as close as possible to 1/48th of a second to get the amount of motion blur we are accustomed to seeing on the big screen. This is the footage we get from the Osmo Pocket 3 recording again at 24 frames per second, but this time with the shutter speed manually set at 1/50th of a second. The moving cars appear much smoother, and pausing at each frame shows a nice amount of motion blur. But now we've run into a new problem. Our video is overexposed and we have no way to recover the details that we've lost. Since the Osmo Pocket 3 has a fixed aperture and we're at the lowest ISO setting, we have no way of reducing the exposure at this shutter speed that we desire. We can solve this problem by using ND filters, which you can kind of think of as being sunglasses for your camera. Now there are a lot of ND filters available for the Osmo Pocket 3, but I just went with these ones from K&F, which were quite cheap, have the same ND ratings as the official ND filters from DJI, and they also come with a polarizing filter. The ND filters attach magnetically to the Pocket 3's lens, and they're thin enough to let the gimbal close when the camera is turned off, unlike some other ND filters. You can even stack the ND filters with the included polarizing filter, although do note that at this point the gimbal will not be able to close. I won't be talking about the polarizing filter anymore in this video, but I do plan to cover it in another, so please consider subscribing. Now, since it's a cloudy day and not that bright, the ND16 filter worked best, giving me neutral exposure at base or close to base ISO. Here's the resulting scene shot using the Osmo Pocket 3 at 24 frames per second, 1/50th of a second shutter speed, and of course the ND16 neutral density filter. This was shot using the normal color profile, but for a more cinematic look, I would probably be shooting in D-Log-M or HLG and color grading it in post. Now let's talk about why you probably want to carry around more than one ND filter. In the last scene, it was a cloudy day and we got away with the lowest rated ND16 filter. But since today is a sunny day, there's a good chance we're going to need to use one of the stronger ND filters. As you can see, without an ND filter, it's completely hopeless. The image is completely blown out. Let's start off by using the lowest ND16 rated filter and then see how things go from there. As you can see, the image is much clearer and it's no longer completely overexposed as it was without the neutral density filter. But if we look at the exposure value that the Osmo Pocket 3 is giving us, it's at +1, which means it's slightly high. And this is at the Pocket 3's lowest ISO setting of 50, which means that we're not going to be able to get the exposure value down any further. So let's swap out the ND16 with the ND64 filter, which provides us with an extra 2 stops of light reduction. That's just another way of saying that we're only going to let in 1/4 of the light compared to the ND16 filter. With the ND64 filter, we are now getting neutral exposure at around 80 ISO, and this is the resulting video. While the 180-degree shutter rule is used to get the cinematic motion blur that we're used to as viewers, it's just a guideline and you're free to deviate from it based on your artistic vision. Narrower shutter angles can be used to create the staccato-like effect and convey a sense of tension and anxiety, while wide shutter angles, like the footage I'm showing you here, can be used for extra motion blur for a softer and dreamy look. For this scene, which just shows cars driving down a road, I personally quite like the results I was getting with a shutter speed of 1/30th of a second, which is roughly equivalent to a 270-degree shutter angle. Now, you might remember that I also got an ND 256 filter in the bundle. To be honest, I don't think this is very useful because even when I'm pointing the camera at the sun and using the slowest possible shutter speed of 1/25, I only get plus 0.7 EV with the ND64. So while using the ND256 does make sense in this case, I don't see many situations which call for an 8-stop filter on a camera like the Osmo Pocket 3. So I've seen some people say it's better to purchase ND filters with a different range of ND ratings, but for me I think it's nice to have the 16 and 64, and I also like the fact I was getting the polarizing filter. Now in this video I've been focusing on 24 FPS video, but what about when you're shooting at other frame rates like 30 or 60 frames per second? Do you just not need ND filters at that point? Well, the 180-degree shutter rule can be applied to any frame rate, be it 30, 60 or whatever. So while videos may look acceptably smooth at these higher frame rates when you're shooting on auto, even in bright settings, you're not going to be getting that cinematic motion blur. And if you want that, you're still going to need to manually set the shutter speed. And ND filters will still likely be needed. Just know that at these higher frame rates, the corresponding shutter speed according to the 180-degree shutter rule is faster, so you'll likely employ lower rated ND filters or not use them at all compared to what you would need shooting at 24 frames per second.